Welcome to Government Speak. This is where we'll cut through the government speak to get the information you need about county programs, services, and events straight from the source. So on this episode, we have District 4 Supervisor Ken Carlson with us today, joining us in studio at 10 Douglas. Supervisor, welcome.
Good morning.
So let's get right into it. Let's start off with your background in public service. So walk us through, your time at Pleasant Hill City Council, and when did you wake up one day and say, I want to be on the board?
Oh, that was many years ago. I've been a Contra Costa my whole life. So it started at a young age, and I'm sure we'll talk about kind of my family history, but My grandfather was a supervisor. So I've kind of been on the campaign trail from about being a 2-year-old till even today, right? So I grew up in Concord and Pleasant Hill. Matter of fact, I'm so old that Back 40 Barbecue opened when I was living in Pleasant Hill over off Douglas Lane, right by the Rooted coffee shop. And then with a long-term 29 years in law enforcement over in the city of Concord, I've always been dedicated to public service. Goes back to Boy Scouts even, and just kind of led into engaging my community and being a part of the community and providing service in any way I can.
But your 29 years in law enforcement, it didn't start there. You were actually in broadcast first, right? How do you make that pivot from broadcast to law enforcement?
Okay, so that's kind of a fun story. I went off to college, and it was finding your way, right? So I'll take my general ed, get that out of the way so you can focus in on the career. And I did, just out of curiosity, I started with a law enforcement class. But in the middle of college, I took off and I went to Korea for 2 years. And when I came back, they didn't have law enforcement, which I'm grateful for in the long run. But it was, why did you want to be in law enforcement? Why did you want to do that kind of direction? And it really was, I wanted to investigate, I wanted to educate. And so the next best thing was to go into broadcasting and look at being an investigative reporter. Come full circle, came back home to start my master's program at San Francisco State, which was going to be in communications. And I needed a part-time job, and the Concord Police Department was hiring for college students. So I signed up, and it led me right back full circle to engaging in a law enforcement career. So I did. I had 29 years at Concord Police Department. It's easier to say what assignments I didn't do over there because I really had the privilege of doing all of it, except for juvenile, and I never got to work a police dog, but traffic investigations, property crimes investigations, patrol duties, neighborhood preservation duties. So just really, and the interesting thing is it carries over into the work I do now. I mean, I've seen people at their best, and I've seen people at their worst, and the struggles they face, whether that's mental health or drug addiction, all those things that we aren't necessarily exposed to on a daily level as just general citizens. So it's really helped me kind of formulate those areas I need to work on and how I can serve the community more.
So what brings you back to public service each time? It's always looked a little different, I think, in the different chapters of Ken Carlson, it seems, but what brings you back to it?
Yeah, it was, how can I further engage the community? I was very active in the Concord community and engaged in the political world even while working there. And it was, how can I get back to Pleasant Hill? And there was an opportunity to run. It was interesting because, being in public safety and law enforcement, it's not a 40-hour, an hour a week job. There's always the call-outs or the overtime or other things that are going on. So I had to go talk to the police chief and say, hey, this is what I'm going to do. Is that a conflict? He was exceptionally cooperative. He may actually, put me in assignments that my schedule could flex. And I ran for Pleasant Hill City Council and got elected on my first go. And it was a great opportunity. I faced some challenges being openly gay, which I struggled with for many, many, many years. In law enforcement, it wasn't very accepting in the 80s. There were challenges to that. I watched others who struggled with even just being accused of being gay and kind of driven out. So when I got on city council in Pleasant Hill, this was an opportunity to kind of engage my community even more. I had the privilege of initiating the Pride celebration and the raising of the Pride flag in Pleasant Hill. And then we were facing some issues immigration-wise. And some of our immigrant populations, they were getting it was just hate. And so to author and to move forward to welcoming the Inclusive Cities Resolution and setting a policy for the Pleasant Hill government that we're going to be a welcoming community. So it was just, how can you keep giving back? That's really what drives me.
And you kind of touched on it when you mentioned, being the first LGBTQ board member as well. So can you talk about that? I've never done anything historic. What's that like? Because that doesn't define your political career, but it certainly is something. And when we talk about representation and inclusivity and the board's direction for diversity, equity, inclusion, and access, it sets a tone.
Yeah, and it's challenging because quite often it's not fun being the first sometimes, because it's like, that's not why I'm here.
Right.
It's just a small piece of the big picture, but it is important. And so, for a while there, being first was really kind of cool. And then it's okay, but it's really, it doesn't define all the work that needs to be done. And I'm really grateful. Chair Glover's theme this year of diversity, equity, inclusion, and access is really important because that covers such a broad range of our population, our community. But it is also, there's some really excitement to it, but there's responsibility and obligation that comes with that. And, the LGBTQIA community looks to me as a leader to say, how can you, support us? How can you boost us? How can we address the issues we face when it comes to discrimination and or hate? And we still have it in broad ranges of our communities.
So what are we doing then in June, to honor Pride Month? Do we have plans or?
Yeah. On June 4th board meeting, we'll be doing our Pride celebration. And I'm looking for ways to recognize others that are doing so much out in the community. There's so many people, one, I've met throughout my political career, but also just in general from the community that have done so much to support the LGBTQIA community, whether that's holding fundraisers, supporting our nonprofit partners who are providing services to the community, and or just those who have made inroads when it comes to being an entrepreneur or a business owner. So I'm kind of looking for that path right now. And it's hard because people don't necessarily like to be recognized. They like to do their work in the background, but the work they accomplish is so impressive and so important that they do need to be recognized. So there's, it's kind of how I feel when it comes to you're the first.
Yeah. Well, if you don't talk about it, people don't know. And it applies to county services and programs too. If we're not out there talking about the work that we're doing, how are we expected to get community support and awareness and understanding for that, especially if you have a call to action for folks?
Exactly.
So let's talk about what's near and dear to you. What are you working on to serve, not only the county, but residents in District 4?
Yeah, that's the interesting thing. I don't want to minimize that I represent District 4, but it really is the broad county. So yeah, I have an obligation to be intimately involved with and engaged with my communities in District 4, but I've also got to think about the broad reach of the work we do as a county in supporting all of our residents. So, housing is huge. How we're gonna meet our housing obligations, but how are we going to engage the right people to build the right type of housing in the right places to meet the needs of all of our community members? So housing stays really high up on my list. We're facing some tough economic times. Inflation's up. We're facing a budget deficit at the state level. How we're going to close those gaps, how we're going to grow in an economic way. I'm fortunate I have the airport in my district, which I think it could be a very strong economic driver. So I focus a lot of attention over at the airport and what we're doing around the airport. And then again, the social safety net. How are we supporting and working on homeless issues, mental health issues, substance abuse issues. Near and dear to my heart, animal services. I've taken them under my wing, I guess you might say. They do such great work, and they face such, I equate them in some respects to children and family services. They have tough jobs, and it takes a unique individual to do that work. And so I just want to be supportive of them, make sure they have the resources, let alone the animals. I'm all about, animals. So was proud to kind of spearhead getting them the extra $750,000 out of Measure X, support the spay and neuter, microchipping, as well as more adoption events so they can get out in the community more, because we're just facing that challenge of we're overburdened at animal services. And our rescue groups, who are a big part of that process, we need to support them too. And they've been strong advocates for us in getting those animals out as fast as we can and adopted out to good families.
And they have new leadership over there. The board just appointed Director Ben Winkleblack a few weeks ago.
Yeah. I haven't had the moment. It's on my calendar, but I look forward to working with him. And again, I'm just so proud of the work they do. It was, and they probably could beat us up in the sense of we never have enough money, we never need all the resources. We hear that from everyone, right? But they do such great work. And again, it takes a unique person to do that job. And so I'm just so grateful for all the hard work they do over there.
In transitioning from one vulnerable population to another, behavioral health is another area I know you have a lot of passion for. Can you speak to some of the work that you're leading on in that arena?
Yeah, we're very fortunate, with A3, anytime, anywhere, anyone, and having those resources. And it's kind of amazing what we've accomplished, and we're not done. But just in a short period of time of getting the call center up, getting the resources available, we're having, it's just an opportunity 24/7 to make a phone call. A lot of those are really no response needed other than answering that phone and connecting people with resources. Such a volume of the calls don't necessarily need a mental health team responding, but it's everything from connection to services to a mental health team responding and supported by our law enforcement partners. And so I look forward to fully staffing that up and actually getting more teams available. But it's already proven to be a great success.
And that intersection with your law enforcement career, how would life have been different had this resource been available while you were a police officer?
Yeah. I think we do great work in law enforcement. Don't want to take away from that. But, with everything that's tasked on law enforcement, and I thought about this, even as a city council member, it was, we need a no smoking ban, in the public. Well, who's going to enforce that? The police. You're facing the challenges of crime issues, mental health response issues, and then you want me to go write a citation for somebody smoking in the park.
Yep.
We got to prioritize. So I always get really cautious about if it has an enforcement piece, are we overburdening law enforcement? Because with all those tasks, how do you get the training to be a really professionally trained individual? I never felt I personally had enough training in mental health response because that was a significant part of our daily tasks as a patrol officer. And we would, there were clients that we would put on a 72-hour psychiatric hold 150 to 170 times a year.
Wow.
And so, there was something broken there, that the connection of resources. So this is where, the call center is really important, because would it have taken a law enforcement response if that person had access to the phone call, to the immediate support and or connection they needed in that moment, as opposed to it reaching crisis? Because not every call we get is crisis. So really having the professionals take on a big part of that job takes a burden off of law enforcement to go out and actually do law enforcement.
So pivoting to the future.
Yeah.
Yeah. In your time on the board, what are some aspirations you have? What do you want to get done? What are things that you're trying to move forward? Because there's a lot that the board is tackling. And so how do you prioritize you know?
After the first year of finally surfacing and getting my head above water in many respects, you know, and I will share, I've been around long enough in a sense to, I had a pretty good understanding of the work that we were going to do as supervisors. But again, we work on regional bodies and boards. So there's environmental issues. I serve on the Air District. You know, so there's issues when it comes to the environment. I sit on the Delta Counties Coalition. What are we doing about conserving the Delta, protecting the Delta? Governor has his Delta Conveyance Project. You know, what are those impacts if that were to move forward? I mean, it's hard to say there's just one thing that has to be done because, again, it goes everything from, you know, protecting our communities from hazardous materials incidents at our refineries to protecting the animals that are in our animal services. So, yeah, to have me put my finger on one big thing, it's hard.
Yeah,
it's really hard. But you know, I'm proud of what we've done, at least in the first 17 months.
Yeah.
You know, we balanced the budget, and we've gotten the budget approved twice. We're being very thoughtful and cautious in a sense about Measure X spending, what gaps we might need to fill based on state cuts, you know, and then creating that social safety net to support our community members.
All in a day's work, right?
Yeah.
I wouldn't be a good communicator if I didn't ask you to plug all the ways in which people can get a hold of you. You know, I know you're active on social media. What are some ways people can keep in touch with you?
You know, I can't remember all my specific websites and those things. But again, I'm on Instagram and I'm on Facebook. So Supervisor Ken Carlson at either one of those social media sites. If you go to the county's website, click on the link for the supervisors, you'll find me and sign up for my email blast. I have a great team that support me in the work I do. So we're getting e-blasts out weekly, if not bi-weekly, just giving community updates, where we're going, what we're doing, how they can engage. It's really important to engage the community, you know, just, you know, coming off of Memorial Weekend, you know, it's, and recognizing our veterans. One of the things that came out of that for me was, you know, in order for all those that paid that sacrifice for us to live the way we do, the way you can give that meaning and value on a daily basis is engaging the community, because we have a process we live by, we have freedoms we enjoy because of them, and the way you pay that back and give it worth is to engage and recognize the ability to engage.
What does engagement mean to you?
Participate in your community, whether that's to vote, volunteer for a committee, a community, a commission, all those things. So there's opportunities to serve your community within the county, within your individual cities. Get engaged.
If there's one takeaway from today, what would you want people to remember the most?
Radio silence, sorry. Yeah, that's a tough one for me. You know, that I'm here, that I'm engaged, and I look forward to working with all my community members in any way I can. I know it's sometimes slow, but in the sense of, look, I reached out to the supervisor and I didn't hear back for 2 days because there's a lot going on. And so I never want to distract people or take that away, in the sense of reach out to us if there's ways, engagement or ideas or need that you have. Definitely I'm here to support.
Well, Supervisor, thank you so much for your time today. That's it for today's show. I'm Kristi Jourdan, your host, Contra Costa County's Public Information Officer. Thanks for joining us on the Government Speak podcast, brought to you by the Office of Communications and Media. Don't take our word for it. Stay curious, stay connected, and stay informed. Until next time, keep your mind open and your facts straight.